It's now recording. Volume is on, hopefully. Sounds okay, so recording is on. All right, let's go to the virtual machine. All right, here we go. So now let's get started. Okay. All right, there it is. So you should be seeing the virtual machine. Okay, so in the past, we've done now quite a bit of PHP. We did some, standalone examples of how it works, right? So we've covered that, and that should be a lot of fun for you. And then we've been working on that MVC model. Okay, so we've been working on the MVC model. And today we are just going to focus on databases. All right, so we're going to look at how to do this with mysqli and also with PDO. They're just two approaches for the same thing. The seed labs still use mysqli, and so, given that you will use, some of those labs in the future, we'll cover that. But also I'll cover in parallel how this can be done with PDO. All right, so let's then get started. Okay, so what do we need? So today we're just going to do very simple examples. I'm going to create some separate scripts, and with those scripts, I'm going to connect to the database, and then we're going to display some data. Okay, so we're going to need first of all our database. So let's start there. All right, so you can see when Mitch created the, you should be seeing the browser. When Mitch created the LAMP VM, he put this link here, very useful link. And so we can click on it. It takes us directly to phpMyAdmin, okay? And then if you've never used it before, it's pretty great, actually. All you have to do is type in your username and password. That has already been configured, so it's going to be ITS362, and the password is the same, so tour, okay? And then don't save, and then here we are. So we are in phpMyAdmin. You can see I already, when I was testing this lab, I just, or this lecture, I created a database already, but, I'll be doing everything from scratch today just to get things going. All right, so basically, when you get a cloud, usually, you're going to get a cloud service when you do something like this, and you'll probably have phpMyAdmin if you choose Linux and everything, which I recommend you do. And it's interesting because they will give you a limit on the number of databases that you can have. So that's how it works. So sometimes, for instance, they'll say something like, well, you get an infinite amount of data that you can upload to your server, but you only get 20 databases. For whatever reason, it kind of works like that. And so you'll have, you kind of have to manage them, but it's usually, enough. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I have, and then you have some, use cPanel or some other way of configuring the databases here, because this is our own server, we can configure this directly. So the first thing that we can do is we can go, so I'll be using basically just these two tabs. So you should be seeing here that it says databases and also SQL. Right, and I'm sure you guys have used this before. These are all the databases that are there. It's got some built-in databases, but we're just going to create our own database. Okay, we can call, so there's no confusion. I'm gonna call this one class. No, lecture. Let's say that's a good lecture. And then I'm just going to say 362 database. Okay, that way I can distinguish. So you're going to create just a database. right? And you can just go ahead and click on it, and there you have it. That's it. Lecture 362 database. So you created that, and there's your table. Then usually, I think if you know, you usually get like a SQL query, right? But I'm just going to be doing everything from scratch here. So we're going to create a couple of, and you guys, I'm sure, have done this quite a few times, so I'm not even going to, you know, go over the details, but we're going to create here just two very simple tables in this, okay? Just very simple. So we're going to go ahead and do create table, and then I'm going to use this. This is the key, that's the squiggly line, the tilde. So we're going to call it authors. Okay, authors, tilde, and then open parentheses. And then after that, we're going to have, you know, let's say author ID. Author ID. There you go. And we're going to say that the data type is int 11 and not null and auto increment. Okay, and then we're going to add a comma here. And then we're also going to add another field, which is going to be the name. Oops, let's make it lowercase, so name, tilde, and that's going to be a varchar 55, let's say, in size. All right, and this one will also be not null, and default is nothing. Single quote there, two single quotes, and then basically then let's define a primary key, and we're just going to say author ID. Author ID, tilde. Okay, no comma here. And then close parentheses, and let's just say engine equal INNODB, and default char set 8. Default, or UTF, sorry, UTF 8. Okay, and then let's just say auto increment 5 equal 5. All right, so hopefully if we did this right, we'll create the table. So now what you do is you go to Go, click on Go. Let's see if it gives me an error. Okay, it gave me an error. Okay, it says, oh, I wrote this in uppercase. Okay, so lowercase, UTF-8.
Do you need to surround UTF-8 in single quotes? Or that?
Nope. I tried this before. Engine default. Oh, yeah, sorry. So this should say char set. So I missed the word char set actually. Okay, there we go. So default char set equal UTF-8. So just use this dot encoding, so that, you know, that's like the regular ASCII language. So now let's, I think this will work. Click on Go. And there you go. All right, so done. So there we have our little authors there. You can ignore this. All right, and now we have authors is there. So select all from authors. But there's no data, right? There's no data. So now let's go ahead and add a few values in there. So I'm going to go into SQL again. And this time around, I want to insert, right? So you guys know about insert. So let's do insert into, this one is called authors. So authors. And we're going to insert in there. So into authors. Let's do author ID, comma, and then name as well. All right, it's got the parentheses there. And then we just insert values. Oops. Values there. And so now let's add some values. So let's say 1 comma, and that's going to be J R Tolkien. Okay, so that's an author. Okay, then let's add another one. Let's do Alex Haley. Okay, then we're gonna do another. We're gonna do just 2 more. So we have some data, and then let's do Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy. And the last one will be Mark Twain. That's how you spell Mark Twain. All right, so then that should be, and then let's add a semicolon there. All right, so now we're going to run this as well. So let's go ahead and run it. Okay, we got the yellow, so it ran. You can click on authors, ignore this. All right, and now you can see we've got our authors in there, right? So we've got J.R. Tolkien. So now that we have these four authors and we have a basically a database available, we can now try to establish a database connection. Okay, so what we need to do is we're going to go now to our code. All right, so I'm going to do ls. I'm going to navigate to var ww ls. Let's go into our ITS 362. I think test 2 is where we were. And then here, MVC example, that this is separate from that. But this is, oh, I have a folder, DB examples, I guess. So let's go in there. Okay. And then, so let me do it clear here. All right, so I'm going to create a new file here. I'm just going to call it lecture. I'm going to say sudo nano lecture. And then, database, just simple like that. And then PHP. So this is going to be our PHP file. Remember, the PHP file will run only on the server side, which means that when you're querying the database, it's running on the server side itself. Okay, so let's open up the file. Let's do a password there. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to, build my code. Right, so PHP, make sure you close it. And what do we need? We need to make the database connection, right? So in this one, I'm going to use mysqli, and then in the second example, I'm going to use PDO. Okay, so that's basically our approach. All right. So here then I'm going to create usually a variable of some kind. So my database, sort of like that. And then I'm going to do new, lowercase new, and then my SQLi. Okay. And then you usually specify the parameters that you're going to need. So in this case, we don't need an IP because we have that is just local host. So we're going to do local host there. And then I'm gonna do, I'm gonna need the username and password, right? So remember the username is ITS362. This is what was configured by the server. So for you guys, you just use this for your project. As I said, if you were doing this in the cloud, this will be provided to you by the provider. The cloud provider will give you these parameters. And then, you know, the password here is tour. Oops. Tour over there. And then finally, we want to specify the database that we want to use in that server. So our database was called, I think it was called Lecture 362 database. All right. So that, I believe that's the database. So we have our database there, and there's a lot of things that you can do, you know, like checking for errors, etc. I'm just going to do, you know, for now, this first example, we're just going to try to get this to work really quickly. So I'm just going to do a little SQL statement here, and I'm going to say, you know, usual select query. Remember, you guys know about stored procedures and all of that, so I'm not really, I'm just trying to use the very basic functionality here, right? So you might imagine how you can create the, you would say call stored procedures so-and-so here, and then you need to have your stored procedures created on the PHP.MyAdmin side, but I leave that to you guys. I will not be evaluating anything related to stored procedures, given that this is not a database class. All right, so I do select all from, and then I think the table is called authors. So then authors, right? And that's it. That's all I want. So select all from authors. You could do, you know, where, you know, where clause, order by, whatever you want, right? But, you know, I'm just going to keep it pretty simple and just have the query. Then once I have this, I'm going to create a variable called result, and I'm going to say something like result. Okay, I'm going to call my database connection, so my DB, right? And I'm going to call it, and I'm going to say query. And for there's some queries out there that allow multiple SQL statements to run, and there are some queries in PHP that only allow one. For security reasons, you should only use the one that allows just one query. Why is that? Because in a SQL injection, the objective is usually to run other queries, right? So if an attacker is trying to run multiple queries, a good security mechanism, obviously, is to only allow one query. So for instance, an attacker will try to, you know, do something like, we'll try to do something like select, and then maybe you know, like delete database or drop database or something in the second query, and therefore you don't want that to happen. So you can read up the literature in PHP, and you'll find that there are multiple ones. When you guys take ITS 450, we will specifically talk about these things related to security, but for now, just be aware of it, please. All right, and then I'm going to run a query, of course, and the query that I'm going to run is the one that I have stored in my SQL database there. All right, so now I have result in my PHP code, but I still want to display it, of course, in some way. So later, we're going to display it in a nice table format and so on. For now, though, I really just want to get the functionality going. So we'll come back to this code a little later. But for now, let's just start the HTML output, right? So we've got that one. We don't need a head section really right now. Oops. And then let's just do body here to complete it so I don't forget an HTML, right? But in here, I need to have basically, now I could have done a couple of echoes there, but I didn't really want to do that. So it's just preference. And so then I'm going to add just another PHP statement here. Okay, so I do that. And then now in here, I can now continue to use the result. So what I have is I have my data in the result, right? So there's a couple of ways that I could do this. So we're going to take a look at one way of doing this, which is basically to iterate. So I'm going to do a while loop. So while, and then I'm going to say, you know, everything is in result, right? So I'm going to say something like, I'm going to create a new variable row, and row is going to be equal to result, and then something like this, and then we're going to say fetch, and again, there are several ways of doing this. This is just one example. Associated. Okay, so then we basically do this, close the parentheses, open the curly bracket, close the curly bracket, and now in here, this allows us to iterate through whatever is in the results section. So now I can go over here, and I'm simply just right now I'm just going to do an echo. So I'm going to do echo, and what do I want to echo out? I want to echo out the contents of row. Now remember, there are two items in row because we have two columns in the table. In the table, we have author ID and name, right? So for now, I just want to test the functionality of this. So I'm just going to print name. Later on in a second, we're going to try to build something a little bit nicer. But this should be it, right? So if we've done everything correctly, if I haven't missed anything, we should be able to print out. Now, another thing I probably want to do is a break line, just because I don't want it to look terrible. So like that, right? So that should do it. So let's save it. Let's double check everything. It's called lecture DB PHP. So now I need to go back to the browser. I'm going to open up, another page, localhost, right? And then I think I have everything in test 2, right? And then in here, was it DB examples? Yeah. All right, there we go. All right, so as you can see, I have the two scripts or the script that I wrote today, which is lecture DB, right? So I'm going to click on it, and it works. There you go. You see that? So this is the data that I had in my PHP MyAdmin. So J.R.R. Tolkien, Alex Haley, Tom Clancy, Mark Twain. So if we look back, those are the authors. And it's as simple as that. Are there any questions, guys, on any of this?
I don't think so.
Oh, pretty easy, right? Pretty easy. All right, so let's now look at PDO. So we're going to create how to do this in, with the PDO version. So that's basically we need to establish an instance of the PDO base class, and then we're just going to use that variable. We use PDO uppercase as the class name. And then we're going to specify some parameters for the constructor for specifying the database source, which is sometimes known as the DSN, and also username and password, because we're going to have those enabled. That's for security reasons, of course. Okay, and so let's go ahead and do that. I'm basically just going to repeat the same thing, but this time around with PDO. So it's another way of doing the same thing instead of MySQL I. So let's to do this, let's go to here, okay? And now I'm going to say sudo nano lecture, but this one is going to be PDO. PDO 362 database. .php. That's a long name. All right, so that's our new script. Pretty much the same thing. we are going to open up our PHP tags, of course. There you go. Then HTML, of course. Body. All right. Notice I'm not really changing much here. And then just close the body section. And I'm going to close the HTML. There we go. So now we are going to go down here and we are going to create our object. So, $. Let's give this one a different name. Let's call it DBH or something. And then now it's very similar, really. So you can say new PDO, right? And then here it's a little bit different. We're going to specify MySQL. Oops, let's do it lowercase. MySQL, and then colon. We can say host. So we specify the parameters. So host is equal to localhost because we're using this server. Semicolon, and then we can specify the database name that we want. In this case, the database is the same exact one, which I think we called it lecture 362 DB. All right, and then comma, and then we need to provide the user and password. Now these could be, let's say for instance, these could be variables, right? So if you'd like something like this. And then what's the user? The user is ITS362. ITS362. And the password, you can just call it pass. And this one would be tour. And that's it. So now we're going to plug those into our, this is usually called a connection string. So let's go ahead and do just that. So we do user, comma, $pass. All right. And now that we've created the object, sometimes you want to check, of course, you want to check if things work. But basically here, we can do the exact same thing we did before. A little bit different though. In this case, let's use a for each. For each. And we're going to say, so I like to create the query. So let's create the query in a separate variable. So let's just do $SQL. And it's going to be the same thing. So select all from authors. There we go. And once you have that query in there, if you did everything right, we can just run it. So the connection string is $DBH. So then we can say DBH query. Okay. And so for each, and then here plug in $SQL. And so we're going to say for each DBH query SQL as $row, same thing that we did before. And then now we can go ahead and try to, oops, should be a curly bracket. So now we're going to try to print this out. All right, and we can try, so that we're going to try a couple of things. Let's try print R as a function. So print _R. And then we're going to say, of course, the whole row. Like that. All right, so that should be enough. All right, so let's try it out. So I'm going to do Control X. All right, this one is called lecture PDO 362 dB. So we can go back to the website. Let's refresh. We have it now, lecture PDO 362 dB. And so I'm going to run this one, and it doesn't work. Okay. All right, so let's go back then, see what error we have. Maybe the database name is wrong. Is it wrong? Lecture 362 dB.
I think you need to capitalize the dB.
Oh, lecture 362 dB. Okay, so. Okay, maybe, yeah. All right, so let's go try to change that. All right, Control X, saved. Let's go back to the browser here. And there it is. All right, as you can see, that's showing as the data as arrays basically, right? You can see that there. Obviously, we don't want to print it out like that. Doesn't look it's not like what we want. So we can go back to our code. And now instead of this print like this, right, I'm just going to comment that out. And instead, I'm going to go back to the idea of an echo, for instance. I'm going to do echo. And I'm going to say $row. And then in here, I can plug in the name. And also, we had an author ID, if I remember correctly. So we're going to do echo $row. Author ID. We can also do just echo, space or something like that maybe. Okay, and then finally let's add the break line so it all looks presentable. So VR, like that. Okay, so hopefully that'll give us the data that we want. So now we can save it. And we can go back to the browser. And now I'm just going to do this. And there you go. So that's, it's as simple as that. Okay, so it's as simple as that. We have, we've created a database connection between our PHP code and our database, MySQL database. And this would be the standard approach to follow using, your either mysqli or PDO. Remember that you will need to do this for your website, for your project. I will show you how to do this for the user accounts and passwords. But you will have to do it because obviously you are going to either sell products or show products on your website of some kind. And so this will be a little bit necessary. All right, so now, and that's it. That's really all there is with the database. Now, the other thing we could go back and establish is when you have an error, right? So when you have an error, sometimes you have code that deals with the error as well. I'll, make sure that the connection was successful, etc. So let's try that. So we're going to try that. Okay, so from the point of view of mysqli. So let's go back to that script first, and then we're going to try it from the point of view of PDO itself. So then let's do an ls. And so it's just going to be lecture DB. We're going to open up lecture DB. Okay. All right, so here we are. So usually what you do is when you make the connection, you kind of want to maybe have a message or something that happens. And so what we're going to do here is, you can add a comment. You can say, make sure the connection is successful. Okay. So then what you check, basically, you do something like if, and then you say $, my DB, right? And then connection error. So connect error. Okay. So you do this check here, and this is just, in case you have a problem with the database, etc. All right. And then if there's an error, basically, it's going to print out some kind of a message. So you have this function in PHP die, just kind of ends things. But you say in here, connect error. So we're going to say connection. And this is just a message you're printing out. So you're going to say connection error. Something like that. And then you can actually specify what the error was. So you can just concatenate and say $, my DB connect, and then error, right, like that, and then concatenate again, and then just close this like that. And also, let's bring this down because I'm going to run out of room. So then dot again, and then you print out the actual, so error number actually, an error and the actual error. So you're going to do my DB connect error. All right, and that can just give you information about what just happened and semicolon. So I think that should be correct here. Let me just get rid of this. All right, and so now I have die, so connection error, right? That's string, concatenated with the connect error number, and then a string again, and then again you concatenate with the actual connection error. And that's it, right? So you just do that, and that hopefully will provide some information. So let's test this out. So I'm going to do Control X, Y, Enter. And now I go back to the browser. Go back here. I'm going to refresh and lecture DB. So currently it works, right? So no issues, right? I'm refreshing. Now, if I go back to the browser and let's say that I provide another password, let's just say for the sake of argument, something like tour1, Control X, go back to the browser, and there it is. Connection error was number 1045, which basically means access denied for user ITS-362 localhost using password yes. What do you guys think about this?
I like how it returns.
What I mean is, do you think it's useful for debugging purposes?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
With the error code, it makes troubleshooting very easy.
Exactly. However, there is a downside to this. You know what the downside is? Security. So when you build a website, there's this idea of the website kind of in test mode versus the website in live mode, okay? What that means is when you have a website in live mode, you do not want these errors to print out. Do you guys understand the reason?
It tells you the IP address and the.
Right, it starts to tell you the local host. It told you the account already. It's telling you some kind of an error. You know, that could be another error that gives hackers insight into your server. So one thing that again, just talking a little bit about security, one thing that you need to do when you're doing something like this is make sure that you only print these messages when you're in like debug mode. But once the website is in live mode, you want to disable this. All right, so how would you do that? You just, you know, in the code, if we go back to the here, right? You know, you would only if and let's say not live, for instance, right? So you only do it like that because otherwise, and so and not live just means that in the config inc page, you're going to have a little variable called are we live or not. And so, you know, that's how you control whether the website is live or not. So for debugging, certainly, but not once this is deployed, okay? But that's it. That's how this works. So since we are here, let's just now, that worked fine. So let's go and change this back to the correct parameter. Now what we want to do is we probably, just so that this looks a little bit better, we want to display this data in a table. Okay, we want to display this data in a table. So how do we do that? Well, for this example, I'm just going to add the table tag, right? Oops, table. And then, so I don't forget, I'm going to close it down here, table. So now I'm going to generate this in a table so it looks a little bit more presentable. This should be the closing. All right, so in here then, I need to have my table row. So the first table row will just be or actually, let's just do it like this. So keep it simple. So I'm going to create a table row. I'm not going to put headings or anything. I'm sure you guys can figure that out. So I'm just going to add. Oh, actually, it needs to be a table row per the loop, right? So it needs to be in the loop itself. So then here, right? It should be like this. Echo table row. There are other ways of doing this. Just one way. All right, and then of course the closing then table row in the loop. Now we have just one value here, but I'm going to put just another value. So we're going to need then this is going to be table data, right? The first one for the name. So we put the name in there, and then in here we're going to, instead of a break line now, we just do table data. Then we open the next one, table data. And well, this should have been echo. That closes that. And some in here, let's just add a value. I'm just going to say echo, let's just say available. So the book is available, or oh, it's an author. Author has N books, let's say. Or actually, you know what? I can just put in the author ID, right? So let's just put the author ID. I have that. So then I'm going to say a row, and this is going to be, I think it was called author ID. Yeah, like that. And so now I have that, and then all I have to do is close. Oh wait, get rid of this. And then in here, just close the table data. And if let me look at this quickly. Table row, table data, the name, table data close, open table data, author ID, close table data, close table row. All right, so I think that should work. So I'm going to do Control X, Y, I'm going to go back to the browser here, refresh. There you go. It shows, if you notice, it is now in a table data. It's just, you know, because of the CSS, right? So let's go and change it a little bit more. So I'm going to go here, and in the table itself, I can add some parameters. So I'm going to say cell spacing equal to, and cell padding equal 6. And then also let's do align center. And then finally border equal, let's say 1. All right, just, you know, you can play with the CSS obviously exactly as you would. So now let's try it out. There are no errors. Should now show a little bit. And there you go. So that's, you know, just an example, but it allows us, you can always play with this with the formatting, the CSS, for it to look better. Are there any questions at this time?
Not yet, at least.
Nope. All right, good, good. So now we've done that example. This was, if we go back to our code, this was with MySQLi. Now let's go ahead and kind of repeat this exercise for PDO. So we're going to go then. So we're going to exit this file, right? And now let's do an ls. And now let's do the lecture one for PDO. So sudo nano lecture PDO. There we go. Okay, we're back. We're back here. Notice this one's the PDO class. All right, so for this one then, let's do a little bit different. So in PDO, what we can try to do is we can try to do this a little bit different. We can use a try catch, for instance. So we tested this before. We know it worked. So let's use a try. Gives us an opportunity to bring up the try. Oops, sorry. The try structure, just like in Python, we have this. Let me add a semicolon here. All right, so try. That should be the same thing. The database name, user, and password. And then now, if there's an error, if there was an error, so in that block of code, then we do a couple of things. We reset DBH to null, so it doesn't have anything corrupted in there, right? And then here, sorry, this curly bracket should not be there. So we do the curly bracket here, and then, so we do try, and then now we do catch, right? So the try catch, famous try catch. So if there was an error, then we can come here and say PDO exception, and then let's just save it as E for error. And then now we can open the curly brackets again, right? And do that. And then in here now, we just need to print out the error. So I'm going to say print. All right, and I'm going to print out, actually without the print. Sometimes I think in Python. All right, so print error, right? So error something, I don't know, And then concatenate it with, so use the dot, and then now bring up the E event, which is the error, and just call whatever its message is. So get message. Right, open, close parentheses, and then of course something like a break line. We can just do BR that. I already had that. And then we close, you know, call the die function, so just die. All right, so that should take care of, you know, kind of the same thing we did with mysqli, just, you know, in another way, basically. So that's the structure for the error. Now, in between also, we can check actually both things, the connection, but also, you know, we can put the for each in here if we wanted to. But let's just try it like this. So in this case, it'll just make the connection, right? And now, if you'd like, you can initialize DBH out here. So DBH to null initially, so null. Then you're going to make the connection, okay? And then if everything works out, we should see our data, right? So we should see our data as we define it. So let's go ahead and, if I didn't make any mistakes, hopefully this will work. So Control X. All right, so now this is lecture PDO. So let's go to the browser over here. Let's go back here. And then it's going to be lecture PDO, and it doesn't work. Okay. So let's go to the code. So PDO print error double quotes dot e get message dot break line die. All right, let me comment that one out. Let me just comment a couple of things out. Let's actually just comment out everything, and let's start from a point where it works. I don't see the error. All right, so no error there, right? So that may have worked. So then if I do this, and I do that, does it error out? Did you guys see the error?
Yeah, when I removed the DBH equals null inside of the try, it worked.
Oh yeah, yeah. So why did I do that actually? Oh yes, you know, okay, that's right. You know what I'm doing, right? I don't know why I did this, but you're right. So if you look, I set it to null, then I make the connection, then I set it to null again. So obviously when I go down here, right, it won't work. That's the error actually. I don't know why I did this, sorry. If anything, you would set the null here, down here. If it errored out, then, yeah, that's a good catch. So if it does error out, this is where you should do it. DBH, no. That's right. And so here you don't have to do that. So that's wrong. All right, so now let's try it again. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to do this and like that. All right, so this hopefully, because I don't see any other errors, should work. So let's test it. Control X, Y. Okay, we go back to the browser over here. All right, seems to be working, which it should. Lecture PDO. All right, that's good. So then now, if we change the same thing, the password, let's just say to tour 1. Okay, that's not correct. So then, but then the problem with this is that it'll still try to execute this code, right? It'll still try to execute this code. So you really need to put this code here inside the try, okay? So that's the only thing. So it would go like here, right? Just be aware of that. But I just want to see if the error prints out and then it errors out, I think. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go to the browser. Right, so there you go. So it gave me the error, which is good. I know that because the error with the exclamation, that's how I wrote it. 1040, it's kind of giving me the same information, and then it just didn't print the rest. And also because we said die, the rest didn't execute. So like if we go over here and I comment out die actually. So the DBH should be before actually, but if I do this, right, and then let's see what happens. I try it again. Oop, it gives me that. All right, that's fine. All right, but anyway, that's how you get errors in this. Okay, so let's leave that in. Die. Actually, I would put the DBH null after or before. All right, before. This die. That one like that. All right, so now that I have this done, what else do I want to do? So now let's change this back to the correct tour. So if we go back to the browser, fresh, and there you go. It's printing our data, no problem. So we have what we needed. Okay, so we have yep. So that's pretty much it for this one. So let's go back to our code. PDO. It's this one. Okay, so now we have our we have this. Check the error. Not. We can run our author and our ID. Okay, you can always just change this to the other format that I was talking about. So just creating tables, basically. Now let's imagine that we have another, obviously you will have other tables in your database. Now we know all of these work, so let's just make one last test before we move on. So that one works, and this one also works. You see we got both examples. So now let's go back to PHP MyAdmin. It closed out because I wasn't using it. Go back in here. So now in authors, I'm going to go ahead and, or in the lecture 32DB, I'm going to create a new table. I'm going to go in here and I want to create another table. Create table books. So before we created authors, I believe, and now we're going to create books. And so in books.
Excuse me.
Any questions?
Yeah, well, not really a question. You're executing that SQL code on the authors table still. So you're not clicked into the regular 362 database. At the top, it's saying
Did I not click onto the database?
you're in the authors table. That's where the SQL code's going to be executing, because it says at the top, run SQL query/queries on table lecture 362 db.authors. So I wasn't sure if that would allow you to create a table in that menu.
I think it should, but it's a good point. I believe it would have, but yes, I see your point. So just click on the database itself, correct? That's what you're saying?
I just wasn't sure. I just thought I'd mention it.
No, because you specify here, right? I think the thing is there's two databases in there. So I definitely have to select the database that I want. Otherwise, I would have to say create table books into this database. So yeah, so it's a good catch. You're right. Thank you. All right, so now I'm going to create books in here. All right, and I'm, same thing. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but let's say book ID. Book ID. Again, it's going to be int 11, not null. That auto increment. That comma. And then let's see, what do we want in a book? We want a book. What's the minimum that we want? We want a book ID, right? Now, what else would you guys recommend? Let's actually think about this one just for a sec. What else would you recommend that we put in this?
Genre.
Hmm?
Genre.
The genre, okay. Yeah, sure, like science fiction and all that. What else?
The book code. I can't think of what it's called right now.
The ISBN?
Yeah.
Okay, good. What else?
Maybe the author.
The author, okay.
The
What else?
publisher.
All right, and the availability. So how do I do that? How do I, let's go with that example, the author. How do I do that? Author, how would I type it here, how? Author.
Well, you would put author in just like you have book ID, and then it would be. I'm sorry, what?
Wouldn't it be insert?
Not insert here. Insert is when you actually, we're creating the table here, right? First, we're creating the table, then we're going to do an insert into that table. But I just mean, how do we define the table right now? I want us to think logically about this. So go ahead. You were talking about authors. So how would you?
So you would put in author just like how you have book ID, and then it would be a varchar.
Varchar. So you're saying we would put in the actual author name in here?
That's what I was assuming.
But we have an author's table, don't we?
Yeah.
So then what do you do? What's the appropriate way of doing that?
Couldn't you link the tables through a foreign key?
Okay, right. So we just put in the author ID instead, right? That's
Yeah.
All right, good. So then let's do that. So author ID. Okay, ID there, and it's going to be then int, and then I think it was 11, right? So just doing that. And then we want this also to be not null, and then default set it to 0. and you can imagine that you can put in a lot of values in here. I'm not going to really put in too much. So we want the title, obviously, that'll be fun to see. So we're going to have the book title, and that can be a varchar 55, right? Also not null, default, single quote, comma, and then oh, I made a mistake here, right? Should be the tilde. Remember, these are not single quotes. All right, and then you could add more. I think I'm just going to add, I'm not going to add ISBN or publication year or anything else, really. So I'm just going to keep it like that. So remember, just 3 things: book ID, author ID, and title. Okay, and then we're just going to set that the primary key for this should be book ID. Just like we did before, primary key will be our book ID. Book ID. Okay, so we've got that set up, and then we can close this. Just say engine equal INODB, and then default character set uppercase, UTF-8, and auto increment 1. Let's just say 1. All right. So now that we have this, let's go ahead. Let's see if it'll run. Okay, that's progress. We look at the books. That's the one that we just created. All right. You can also all right, you can also do this not through these queries. I'm just doing this for the purpose of doing this really quickly. But the other way that you can do this is whenever you have these, you can actually insert the data through here. Okay, so you can follow these. So if you don't want to create these through queries, you can always just use the PHP MyAdmin itself. It allows you to insert data directly into everything. Okay, so you can see the functions there, insert and so on. You can click on those and just do it on the GUI interface. Otherwise, you have to get the queries perfectly right. Okay, so you don't get little errors and things like that. All right, so now that I have this, the last part should be hopefully just to insert some data in here. So I'm going to do insert into books this time. So books, and the fields were book ID, book ID, that's one of them. And then it was author ID, author ID, and then it was title. I think we only did those 3. All right, and so then, we say the values that we want. So values, and then let's just kind of do it here. So now open parentheses, 1, comma, and then the first author, right, was, do you guys remember what the first author was? So, I think it was Tolkien, right? So that means his movies are Lord of the Rings, well, actually, those are not the books, right? The Two Towers is the book. So the Two Towers. Okay, and then let's just do a couple more from Tolkien. All right, so 2, 1. And then we're going to say the return of the king. That's another one of the books, I think. Right. One more. Let's do 3, comma, just another Tolkien. And I don't remember, what's another Tolkien book? You guys remember? I'm just gonna say Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit, right? The Hobbit is one. Okay. So The Hobbit, I think that I believe is a book. At least it's a movie. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. The Hobbit. All right, there we go. All right, so that should be enough to insert. So let's try it. Okay, worked. 3 rows inserted. Books. You can see them there. 2 towers, the Return of the King, the Hobbit. Okay, they're there. So now we can go ahead and go back to our file. All right, so we're going to use the one with PDO. So let's click on this one. And let's just say, well, we got the connection made already, right? And now we just want, first we print the, I'm not going to do anything like you guys can do, right? Select all from this table where intersected with this other table. I leave that as an exercise for you to have fun, right? So for, you know, after the class, go ahead and write that query that, you know, displays everything. Here, I'm just going to write just to test that that one works as well. So I'm going to do SQL, and I'm going to say now, select all from, and then now it's books, right? So books, semicolon. And then again, I'm just going to say for each $DBH query, oops, sorry, query $SQL as row. Okay, close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and then in here now, once again, we're just going to display our data. So I'm going to say echo $row. But this would be book ID, right? And then echo, just add equal or something, and then you can always piece together a string as well if you'd like. And then we're going to do echo row is title. Title, there we go, semicolon, and let's add a break line. So echo all right, so that should be it. Okay, so now this would bring in those books. I'm going to do Control X, Y, lecture PDO DB. Go over here, go back to this one, And there we go. You can see that the last three now, they're not in the table or anything like that, but the last three are the Two Towers, the Return of the King, and the Hobbit. And that's it. That is how you can make your, you know, at least some basic ways of, first of all, interacting with PHP-MyAdmin. Remember, now that I've done this, as far as your term project, you should, you have a topic, so you should start designing your database. Start thinking about, okay, this is going to be my database. You only need one, remember, one database, but create multiple tables. Make sure that you use, primary keys, foreign keys, the appropriate way as you have learned in your database courses. I'm not looking for anything fancy. I'm not going to request that you do stored procedures. I leave that to you. Right? But just, follow appropriate, the basic but appropriate database approaches. So you saw we created 2 tables, authors and books. We inserted some data. And then you can just do queries as you would normally do. And then we have seen the pipeline of how to display the results. Basically using both mysqli and PDO. If you remember mysqli, you can use either one. I don't really, it doesn't, it's no issue for me what you decide to do. I leave it entirely up to you to decide. All right, so we've talked about creating the connections. So remember, this is object oriented. It's an object. You create a variable usually. And then you use that object, you specify the parameters, and then you can always do whatever you want. With SQL, you can, select data and read the data. You can insert data from PHP. So anything that you can do in the queries in PHP-MyAdmin, you can do from the PHP itself. Okay. And so I'm just double checking that I covered everything. All right, so that's it as far as that. So as you might imagine then, the next thing that we can do is do this for the term project. Okay, so we can do this for our term project. You will need basically to create this string. So in our MVC model, we also want this. All right, so now if we go back to PHP-MyAdmin, right, I'm going to need a database for the term project. Okay, for the MVC model. So remember, so we can, since we're here, let's create a new database. And I'm just going to call this one database MVC, MVC 362 DB. And there it is, right? So that's, so this is something when we go back to the code project, we're going to need this database. We're going to populate this with some users, okay? So we're going to create a users table. So the next thing we're going to need to do is create a users table, and that way we'll use that users table to, to query the user accounts and passwords. All right, so you can start thinking about that if you'd like. So we can go then to, remember the parameter is MVC 362 DB. Okay, so we can go back now here We're going to exit out. We are done basically with these, right? So what I'm going to do also is I'm going to provide a homework assignment, which will be your last homework assignment for the semester. Remember, all you have to do is create the grade calculator, and it should have a database connection. It doesn't have to be very complex. Just, you know how we've been storing the data in cookies. Now just store some of the data in the database itself. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can even start doing that if you want to just get that homework done. So it'll just be that. I usually make it very simple because at this point, you had 2 PHP homeworks, and then I just want you to focus on the term project. But as I was saying, let's go back out here, and now we go back into our MVC module or folder, sorry. Clear. Oh. All right, so MySQL Inc. PHP. If you remember, let's actually go into index first, right? So I'm going to go into index. Index. All right, and if you look, now we are going to require MySQL. Okay, we're going to require it MySQL. We can bring that up, but what is MySQL? Well, let's take a look. MySQL would be in the includes file, right? In the includes, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay. So we need to go into the includes. All right. And then in configuring, let's take a look at it. All right, so what do we have? All we have is that we are saying that MySQL means MySQL Inc. PHP, so we are bringing in that file. So that's correct. And then now we can exit out of here. And now let's go into MySQL. Like that. And now we are ready, right? So now we are ready to make the connection as we want it, right? So what we are going to do is the exact same thing that we did before. So I'm gonna now define the parameters and make the connection and store it in that variable. So I'm gonna say DB user is root, password is tour, DB host is localhost, and then here all that remains is to change this. I think we called it. You guys remember if it was uppercase or lowercase MVC?
It was all uppercase.
All uppercase. MVC 362 DB, right? That's it. Now we have our database in our server. It's got no tables, but at least the connection will work. Then we can come over here and just now set up the connection, right? So let's do it with PDO. So then I'm going to say $DBH equal new PDO. And then in here, we can say MySQL. Oh, lowercase. MySQL host equal localhost, right? And then the database name, we already have that now. So that's going to be DB name. And actually we can, now I just realized we could hard code these, but I would have to piece together the string. I don't really want to do that. So I'm just going to hard code them here as well. Just keep in mind, you could always piece together that string. So here then it was MVC 362 DB. All right. And then finally, these we can use here, right? We can do comma DB user, DB user, so if we look, yeah, DB user, I think it's like that. And then the other one is the password is DB password. Let's make that DB pass because it's too long. DB pass. Okay, and so that makes should make the connection, the database connection, and that's all we need here. Now, of course, you can also do the try catch and all that. I leave that as an exercise for you guys. I'm not gonna do it here, but what's important is that the variable dbh, this little variable here, is the one that you can use in the rest of the code. So remember that it's going to bring in, when you call MySQL Inc. PHP, when you require it, it'll bring in all of this into your file. Okay, so if I do Control X, right, and now I go here, I can go back to index. So let's actually go, let's go into the includes, look at something. And then cat config. Right, so you can see that there, MySQL. So now we can go into index finally. So index should be sudo nano index. All right. So we bring MySQL. Now you can assume at this point that you have $DBH. It's like you can assume that that's already in your environment, right? And so you would use that. Now we don't have any tables yet, but you can assume that you have it. Now, because it's a require, if this fails, the code will fail, okay? Then we bring in the header, and then here we bring the footer. So if everything is correct, we can now establish the database connection, and it'll print out the header and the footer. So let's try that. So I'm going to do Control X, Y, and then I'm going to go into the code itself. Remember, so here. And then this was called MVC sample. Okay, and then index PHP. Huh, didn't work. All right, so all right, well, let's take a look. So I went to test to MVC example. MVC example index.php. So it's obviously something to do with the database that it didn't run. If I let's just try this. I'm gonna remove this one. All right, that should work. I think. Okay, so that works, right? So I know it's something to do with the database. So let's go back then. All right, so it's something here.
Mine's working, and my index PHP looks exactly like yours.
Really?
I think I might have an idea.
Uh-huh.
Can you go back to where you defined the DB_user? I think you left that as root when it's supposed to be ITS 362.
Okay, hold on. Control. Did I change any? No. So go back to MySQL. Oh yeah, okay. And this is why it's probably useful to do that try catch, right? So because it would have told me where the error was. You're right. So here it shouldn't be root. It should be ITS 362. Okay. So ITS 362, that's the account, password store, localhost, MVC 362DB. We make the PDO connection. Okay. So now, try it again. Let's give this one a last look. That's enabled. All right, so now we can go back to the browser. There we go. So it's working. So now this is great because now your code, your project code, it's got the nice little menu. It's starting to look MVC, and now guess what? We have a database connection via PDO to PHP_myadmin. Okay, so that's good progress there. Now the next thing that we're going to do, not today because we're running out of time, but on the next time we meet, will be that we're going to start to create a table, a database in your a table called users in the database, so that we can then start thinking about how do we do the logins and all of that. All right, so that's it. That's a good stopping point for today. On Thursday, what we're going to do is we are going to look at the homework, right? So I'll assign the homework assignments if there's any questions. And then from there, all that's left in the semester now, I've kind of gone over all the topics. The only thing that remains is to finish up this website, right? So we're going to continue to make it nice. Also, I wanted to cover today the prepared statement. So it's just a tool in databases to kind of protect against SQL injections, but we'll just remind me, we'll talk about that in another lecture. And by the way, that actually is covered with a lab in 450 in your software assurance class, so shouldn't be an issue. All right, so I'm gonna stop now.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
I
go
have
ahead.
questions.
Yes.
I have questions about the setup of the PHP_myadmin. Can I share my screen?
So the setup, you mean? Okay.
Yeah. Can I share my screen?
Okay. Hold on. Go ahead.
Okay. Wait. Did you see it?
Why are you installing PHP_myadmin though? Because you should already have it, right?
The problem is that using the myadmin is that when I open the website, the tables, it requires the tables, but it doesn't show up the tables, all the tables.
So go open the browser, please.
Wait a moment. And
So in that link that says PHP_myadmin, click on that link that says PHP_myadmin. Yeah, log in here. Okay.
and immerse. And there's no table found.
No table for what? You have to create the tables. You saw me create tables today, correct?
Yeah, so we have to create tables by ourselves.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Of
Thanks.
course.
Got it. So you
Does that
already
answer your
set.
question? Does that answer your
So
question?
yes.
Yeah, for
And
the
yeah.
for the project, I can't give you the tables because you're all creating your own different projects, right? What I will
Yeah.
do is, as we start building the MVC model, you should create. So what I can see here is that you didn't create the database that we created in class today because we called it MVC 362DB, correct?
Mm.
So that's actually the table you should have created, and then probably the first table we'll create is users, okay? But next class, not today.
Okay, got it.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. And
All right.
can I ask another brief questions about the homework due this week?
Not right now, though. I'll stay for a couple of minutes if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll end this lecture, okay?
Okay.
All right, so you can stop sharing, and I'm going to stop the recording at this time or pause.